The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Paranormal Concept right here on Parasearch UK Radio with your host, Paul Rook.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and tonight, as always, we are joined by the lovely Kerry Greenaway. Hello, Kerry.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I've just finished listening to Neil's new show. Neil and Jane had Jane Harris on with them. Great show that.
Yeah, I was listening as well. It was really good. The only issue I had, right, was when I think Jane Harris said all Capricorns are, what was it? All Capricorns are stubborn, and I'm like, I'm not stubborn.
Yes, she's right, you are.
No, not at all. No, I'm very fair-minded. Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about the case of Anna Ecklund. But before we get started on that, I want to introduce our other special co-host tonight, Kieron. Hello, Kieron.
Hello. All right.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a good couple of days researching about this, and it's been fun.
Excellent. I'm glad you enjoyed it just as much as we do.
Yeah, it's all about bring people together who enjoy this type of stuff.
That's it. Absolutely. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. So I know, obviously, we spoke. Myself and Kerry, we've done a show previously about all this. So, Kerry, do you want to just sort of like go through and catch everybody up? When
we previously looked at the subject, we were actually talking about exorcism in general, and we looked quite heavily at the case of Annalise Michel, which is the well-known one, the exorcism of Emily Rose. We all kind of knew that one. When we was looking into that and various other cases, we came across this particular case of Anna, and in a funny kind of way, it's more horrifying because there's no medical reason for Anna to have experienced what she experienced, whereas at least with Annalise, there were medical underlying issues surrounding that. She was on a heavily medicated, whereas Anna wasn't. And that when we looked at it, we were talking about exorcism before. We were looking at it in regards to, lots of different avenues. It's a very religious perspective from that one. But this one, I thought, it's an older case. It's not so well known as some of the others, but it's fascinating because although she was medically looked at, she wasn't diagnosed with anything. But there's a whole psychological background to this as well. So is she possessed, or is she just like manifesting those things? But when you look at some of the accounts that were written about this by people that were supposed to have actually been there and witnessed, you kind of sit there and think, oh my God, if that actually did happen, how strange is that? We'll go into more details on the case, but that's sort of the overview. And the other thing, there was a link between Anna and Annalise, because some of the demonic entities that were supposed to be attached were the same.
Yeah. So I know Anna Ecklund, she was born in 1882. Wasn't it in Wisconsin?
Yeah.
She was born.
Yes.
Okay, cool. What sort of happened in her life at sort of that point? I mean, did she have a good upbringing?
People don't know when, or at least I couldn't find any when our mother died. And from what I read online, that she didn't have a good upbringing with her father. But they don't know if our mother looked after her until she was older, or until she was 10, or maybe in early teens. But from what we know of, if it was just her father that was around, then she definitely didn't have a good upbringing.
Okay. And didn't she live with her aunt as well at some point?
Yes, which is, I guess, something that you can get to a little bit later, because obviously with the father and the aunt.
I think that was about 1908, I think. Something like that, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that there was a very big difference, though. Her father was anti-religious. He wasn't religious.
Yeah, he hated it.
He hated it, didn't he? Whereas Anna herself was very religious. She really did buy into the faith, as it were. And her aunt, who is the... now, there's a little bit of... We're not sure if it's like a true aunt or it's like a relationship with the father and it's called an aunt kind of scenario.
They don't know if, what's it called again, it was the aunt, because obviously apparently there was like incestuous relations with the aunt and the dad. And apparently that's one of the things that they were asking Emma. Obviously, sorry, I'm using her real name, Emma Schmidt.
Yes.
Using Emma. That was one of the things that they asked her, and that she didn't accept, she didn't want. Mm-hmm. And that's why the father didn't like her didn't like her at all, and same with the aunt, and that's why they were both trying to curse her, which is apparently the cause of why she got possessed.
That's right.
Okay. Do you not think though that with obviously the issues with the father and possibly that whoever he was seeing at the time, even if it was the aunt, and sort of the major trauma that she's already gone through, do you not think that could have contributed to it in any way?
I think so. I definitely think that, because going through childhood, if you're abused from both our parents at that point, which is our auntie and our dad, you're going to grow up with psychological trauma. You're not going to, and especially if you're very religious, so she's going to type of like believe in religion to be this almighty thing that can save her from her father. So when she is possessed in some sense, she was obviously looking towards religion to set her free in some way.
I also think she's also torn morally, because she's got this belief in the church that it's telling her one thing, and yet she's living in an environment in her home house, as it were, that's so diverse, so different from what she's being taught by the church. So that is quite a horrible thing to try and deal with. And you've got to remember, at this stage, she's very young.
I think like 13,
like
14.
We don't know what happened to her mother. Yeah, we don't know what happened to her mother, at what point she lost her, or what happened to the mother. So there's going to be issues surrounding that, no doubt, at that age. I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
She first started to display problems at the age of 14. So we're hitting puberty.
Yeah.
You know, we're in
puberty,
aren't we?
It was also rumoured that the aunt was supposed to, that the locals sort of assumed that she was a witch of some kind.
Yeah.
So maybe that, again, contributed to the trauma that she's sort of, obviously in her head, she's torn between the religion, the witchcraft, assuming she was into the witchcraft stuff, and obviously that with the father as well.
She probably was, like, in some way, I personally think she was schizophrenic, because at the time that wasn't diagnosed, like it wasn't a thing. I believe she was that, and that she had manifested that her father and her aunt were the devil, because her father didn't like the religion, didn't like the Catholic at all. Even on his deathbed, he swore at the priest that was on his deathbed alongside him, And his aunt was a similar situation, and what's it called again? Was an apparent witch. So I think she manifested that she was almost possessed by these two people that surrounded her entire life.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it. I've got some of the research in front of me now, and it says suddenly in 1896, at age 14, she became experiencing severe issues with attending church and receiving communion. She began describing compulsions to smash the holy water fonts, to hurt the priests, and also that she began to suffer from signs of depression and having unhindered sexual thoughts, and she believed that she was basically becoming insane.
Which is, I guess, some signs of something like schizophrenia that could have caused a higher issue, with it being untreated and people not knowing about it.
Obviously, she's had this rough upbringing as well, and obviously, as Kerry said, she's hit puberty and she just wants to lash out and stuff like that. I mean, okay, it's a severe case, but I'm still not convinced that she was possessed.
I think the thing with this one that makes it interesting is they did go down that route and look at doctors and the medical industry to try and find out if there was a medical reason. You have got to remember when this is, though, they're not as advanced then as we are now. And they said she was normal.
Yeah, they said she was absolutely fine, yeah.
Normal, that there was nothing wrong with her. So you can understand why they're probably at the end of their tether if they've got their daughter or Anna's, or Emma, depending on what name you want to use. We could use Mary too if we wanted to, but
yeah,
she's called different names. When she's cast as normal, so they're then left with this situation. So because she's so involved with the church and she has this aversion to church, you can understand how sort of the church thing became involved with this, can't you? Because they actually called in a priest, didn't they? I can't remember his name. Oh, Father Theophilus Risinger.
Theophilus Risinger.
Yeah.
It was called in because he was very good with languages as well. He could speak in multiple languages, and that's what another one thing that actually was starting to happen to her as well, was that she was starting to speak in Hebrew, Latin, I think it was German, French, I believe, Italian. She started speaking fluently in 6 languages, which confused a lot of people. But they thought maybe the French. Maybe they thought maybe the German and the Latin was just because her father was German and that basically Latin was still taught by that time in the church. So there was another thing that kind of happened out of nowhere, that she was able to speak multiple languages.
True. Yeah, you are right on that one with the German and the Latin. But they did say that because she was... what their argument against the Latin was although she was learning it through the church and that, would she have been able to have interpreted the rites that were being said in Latin? They didn't think her knowledge would have extended that far, and it did at times. So there was an argument as to why it was unusual. It wasn't just the sort of language you would have picked up just by attending church and being around those, that language. The same as German. They thought she had a basic understanding of it because, she was around it and people were speaking German around where she lived and that. So she probably would have had basic understandings of these languages, not to the extent she was displaying while she was under this possession. That's the only thing I can call it, really. But I have to say, I think the interesting one of this is when the Father Theophilus, I love that name, when he came in to this is an interesting character in himself. He comes across, when you read about him, as somebody very stable, very, very set in his faith. He's got an unwavering faith.
Yeah, like noble, and like he's there only for good, and he can solve anything from what it was there, because he was there for a long time trying to solve this case. I mean, that was another thing that I found incredibly interesting, was the fact it went away. Yeah. Is that they say that she stopped being possessed, and then she felt better, but apparently she was still hearing voices. But then was fine for a long time, and then it came back. Mm-hmm. So that was the thing that I found interesting, the fact it went away and then came back.
Yeah, and in between, she was functioning like a normal person. She was attending church, not having any problems. She was just normal. Yeah, she still heard the voices, but it's almost like she could ignore them.
Yeah.
Mm.
But when she let's talk about the first exorcism that we know about, though. It's not as well documented, the first one, though, is it?
No, not well at all.
They reckon it was a 14-day exorcism, and that they actually came to grips with things, and she got better. But the second one is where it becomes really, really interesting, because she, like we said, she had all these problems, went through an exorcism, and then seemed normal, and went through quite a few years of acting normal, being normal. So, what do we make of that? From say it was a medical condition, what did it do? Just settle down for a little while, and then she acted normal again, and then, or did the first exorcism reaffirm her faith in the church, which helped stabilise her? If we're looking at it from a psychological level, of it debasing her. Her experiences and her age have debased her to lose her stability, should we say?
Could it not? I mean, did this priest have any experiences with any mental health cases previous to this?
Yeah, I think what you have to understand with the exorcism process, and I don't know if you found this out, Kieron, but was that the church won't just go straight in. They go through a process before they'll go into an exorcism state, and you have to get that sanctioned by somebody higher than you, and you have to go through mental and psychological things first. You can't just go, oh, I think I'm possessed, I'll have an exorcism. It's not as simple as that, and even back then, it wasn't as easy as that. So he would have had experience. And it wouldn't have just been his decision. Does that make sense?
So I mean, the point I'm sort of trying to make is that maybe going back to the late 1800s, the doctor's experience with mental health might not have encompassed the whole possession stuff. Where if the priest is dealing with that on a regular basis, he would recognise it above a medical professional, and he would be able to deal with that.
What, you mean the church would be able to diagnose a mental health issue?
In a way, yeah, because they would have been the ones that have dealt with it quite a lot. If you know what I mean, they would have been called out for they would have been called out for a lot more of these type of cases. Yeah, so that the priest would have been Because people went above the church over the doctors and anything like that. People still prayed for them to be healthy instead of going to a doctor. So maybe the priest had been called out to more. The reason I suggested that as a cause of action is because, as you know, I'm in St John, and we get different divisions do different duties. Where I live in Basildon, we're really quite good on the whole first aid scenarios as a whole. But when you go to places like Grays, for example, they do a lot of renal-resics duties. So their expertise is basically car accidents, because they do renal-resics and cutting people out of cars on a weekly basis. So they're more experienced at that than, say, Basildon, for example. And you sort of get that. I mean, I know we're all trained to the same level and we can all deal with it anyway, but the practice really does help. So if people go into the priests for exorcism cases and not the doctors, then it's going to be the priests that will pick up on that quicker than the doctors.
I see what you're saying, yeah. I would say they would have experience in it. I would say they probably would recognise the differences. I don't think they would even back in those days, it would have been a easy step to go into an exorcism.
Yeah.
Even in this day and age, I mean, the trouble is it's popped up everywhere. It looks like you can get an exorcism on every street corner in certain countries. But in regards to a Catholicism exorcism, you're right, it's not as easy as that. And I think priests would, they take confession, they see a lot of things, they hear a lot of things. And you're right, the flock would have been, more substantial probably than it is, or more regular than it is sort of in this society, in this day and age. But yeah, I think they're leaders of the community. They sort of become
They become almost medical professionals in themselves.
Yeah, I would agree with that point. So I think, yeah, if they honestly thought there was something medically wrong with her or medically wrong with her, that's
why they went to the doctors with her.
Pardon?
That's why they went to the doctors and actually tried to see if they could get her diagnosed or anything.
Yeah, but they said she didn't show any nervousness. She just appeared totally normal. So where does that leave you when you have got this situation and your doctors are telling you that it's, she's normal, like nothing wrong with her?
See, I personally think on how it went away or how it suddenly disappeared for her, that in a lot of churches and stuff like that, where you have these speakers who can suddenly bring on very strong emotions, almost like how a magician puts someone to sleep. Almost like that, yeah, exactly. Almost like that. In some way, I believe that. I don't know if any of you saw any of the videos online of where there's some inspirational speaker who's also speaking about God, can go up to someone and say, "I'm going to heal you." Yeah. I'm going to heal you, and that person 100% believes in that they've been healed. And in some cases, it does help them technically for a while, but not in the grand scheme of things. I think it could have been something like that, where our faith in the church was so strong that him doing this kind of doing the exorcism on her did help in some way. Almost like you say, reassure her in her beliefs.
Isn't this sort of almost going back to what I say about having protection when you go on a ghost hunt or stuff and investigations, where a medium would, for want of a better phrase, brainwash you into believing that you're protected.
Yeah.
And then with that mind... Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of the same thing, isn't it?
If you're told enough times by anybody, and even in day-to-day life, if you're told enough times, I don't know, that, for example, if you tell a child enough times that they're stupid, the chances are they'll end up with a belief system based on the fact they've been told that they were stupid. And then obviously later on in life, they then go, well, actually, I've got to break that down and work through that, because I'm not stupid, I can achieve. And you don't even realise these self-belief systems are put into place. So, yeah, you don't know what the difference is in her life at home, and that church belief might have been such a emotional crutch for her, that if it gets wavered, it got reaffirmed.
It could destroy her.
She was all right. Do you know what I mean? Then she stabilised for a bit longer because she still had that religious crutch, as it were. It's difficult.
Then, as he says, the second one.
Yeah. It is a fascinating case because, like you say, let's go into what happened next, because she was repossessed, as you said. She was repossessed. Why don't you tell us about that, Kieron?
So, yeah, of course. Later on in her life, basically, she continued to live her life normal, absolutely fine, as was said. And then slowly she started becoming more and more possessed again. She started getting... what was it? I think she was... I'm terrible at this part. I'll have to try and pick it up off the top of my head again. But basically, when the priest came back, they saw that she was possessed again, and that they took her again to the medical professionals to say they said she was fine. And then eventually, I think there was someone higher up that said she was possessed. And then that's when he had to get the higher ups, and he said, okay, we'll want to do a proper full exorcism. and they agreed. And then he wanted to take her away somewhere. I can't remember where they took her off to, but
that's when they took her to Wisconsin.
And then they took her away for a full exorcism where she ended up getting tied to the bed. They ended up getting really, they say, very strong. What's it called again? Sisters. So what are they called again? Yes, nuns. They ended up getting strong nuns, and ended up trying to hold her down and tying her to this bed, where she ended up spouting that basically she was possessed by her dad, by her aunt, and by a few other demons, and I believe it was the actual Beelzebub themselves when they asked whoever was possessing her, who are you possessed by? Why are you here? They said it's by Beelzebub, and that her aunt and her father said that he could have her. That basically Beelzebub or the devil could actually have her, and that's why he has her. And then there's obviously a lot more that goes on afterwards, which after doing the exorcism for a while, the devil starts actually saying to the priest that we're going to get you, basically, and said by Friday something will happen. He said just wait and see, something will happen. And by the Friday, he got called off to go to a mother's house, I believe, who was very ill. And on his way back, he crashed in his car, but survived, which he went back to the house of the exorcism of Anna and said, oh yeah, I've done this, I've survived. What does that mean of of the devil and stuff like that? And he goes, well, look what happened to your car, your new automobile, or something they called it. And in the end, he said, I can't remember what. I completely went blank after that. But
it didn't just. Where they were doing the exorcism was actually in the priory with the nuns. So that's where they were doing it. Now it started to affect everybody external of the exorcism itself. So not just the people that were involved in the exorcism, but like they were having experiences outside the exorcism. So there was like one of the guys couldn't sleep, because there was scratching, and there was they checked for rodents and everything.
Yes.
They checked for logical assumptions. He had this automobile accident, and then he was taunted the next day, but she couldn't possibly have known that. She was tied to a bed, for God's sake.
Yes, of course, and when she got given some food as well, she got given some food that had apparently been put holy water on it, and she somehow knew that it had holy water on it, even though she never saw it get done.
Yes. But when they gave her stuff that wasn't consecrated, she didn't react. But she only reacted when it was stuff that had been consecrated, like the holy water and food thing. Those things are fascinating, do you not think? Some of the demons... Oh, sorry, I'm moving on too quickly. Carry on.
No.
I get all excited.
No. It's fine. I find it incredibly interesting, the fact that how... If this is 100% true, obviously maybe some bits of it has been over-exaggerated, but even if there's any sort of fact in that she was able to differentiate between ones that had actually had holy water put on it and which ones hadn't, that is, there's no real way to explain on how she would know.
Now, the reason we have this account of this particular exorcism, and it's quite in-depth when you look at it, was actually because it's actually written by a guy called Father Carl Vogel, who wrote Begone Satan, a soul-stirring account of diabolical possession. Now, this actually comes from notes and a diary written by a guy called Steiger, who was part of the exorcism process. So we have this account written by these people back in the day of when it was supposed to happen. Some of the account is absolutely, well, when you think about it, I don't know how I would react if I came across this kind of scenario. You've got a person tied to the bed, a woman. You've got her contorting and distorting so she doesn't look like the person she is. Mm-hmm. She's not taking food and drink, yet she's vomiting 20 to 30 times a day with quantities that, quite frankly, shouldn't have been able to have been produced because she's not eating or drinking. She
Yeah.
developed superhuman strength. One of the accounts says that she broke free from her restraints and the people holding her on the bed, actually levitated off the bed and ended up crawling up the walls. And when you read it, in your head you're seeing horror movies, aren't you? We've seen it.
Yeah.
Seen it in horror
Almost
movies.
like a book.
Yeah, and these people are saying that is what they experienced. And
See,
they're
I find it
experiencing
so hard to
stuff
believe.
outside the I know. It does, doesn't it? It's so hard to believe.
Is this written by someone that was actually in the room when this was happening?
Yeah, Steiger was actually in the room, part of the exorcism process. And then Father Carl Vogel took notes and wrote up the diaries and did interviews with the people that were involved, and then wrote the Big on Satan book.
I wonder if after the notes had been taken and then been put into the book, the Big on Satan book, if he had almost like not read in between the lines, but read it and said, okay, this would sound better. Or this would sound more interesting if this happened. Exaggerate it.
Was the book written in English?
I don't know. I believe it was Latin.
That'd be interesting,
I was wondering whether it would be lost in translation.
To be fair, I don't know. You can still buy this book, by the way. I have looked it up. You can buy the book. I'm very tempted. I'm not going to lie on this one because I think it's absolutely fascinating. I would say there's probably a small possibility that there was some
bad translations.
Possibly, if it was written in a different language, I would imagine Siberia is where it happened. Possibly there's a translation issue. Possibly there's an expansion on the truth. Possibly. But we're not talking about any old writer. We're talking about a father. We're talking about somebody ordained by the church that's written this. So whether or not their conscience would allow them to embellish the truth, I would
definitely. Was it a book that was being sold?
It is now.
It is now, but was it at the time?
I don't know, to be fair.
If it was going to be sold at the time, or if it was, there's a lot of things that drive people to over-exaggerate situations, be it to make them sound better, be it to be able to turn around and say, "Oh yeah, I've experienced this," or because if there was no actual source, or after you'd have written it down, if there was no other source than his book that he had said this is what the notes said, then there's no real guaranteed way to say if he had over-exaggerated it or not.
Fair point. I don't know the answers to those questions. Just putting it out that there is a book on it and it was written by this father off the notes of people that were there. Other than that, I didn't find out much more about that.
I mean, when did this become almost more? It's obviously still not well known, but more well known, because I believe the original father, the one that was in it, the one that you pronounced very well, he died in 1972, I believe, or something. He died. If there was any accounts of, I guess, because at that time obviously there had been cameras, if he had ever been recorded speaking.
Well, I didn't find anything. I found loads about Annalise Michel, but not really about this case. Although, when I was looking at it, it was stated as a really famous case and was supposed to be one of the inspirations for things like The Exorcist.
Yeah, you could definitely see it. When you were saying about the notes, about climbing up the walls and suddenly levitating and constantly throwing up, and it definitely is like it's being used as source material for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and to be fair, looking at this, I mean, gosh, it's a film waiting to happen. If you want to go,
there was actually a film made for it, but it was horrendous. It was a really, really bad film made, but which is a shame in some respects, as you said, it's just waiting to be made into a good film.
That's it. But I find it interesting that, okay, so even if you take it on a base level, an exorcism is being done on this woman, even if she didn't ever climb up the walls, maybe that bit is an over-exaggeration, but the rest of it, if that's half true, every single nun after the exorcism didn't want to be there anymore. They wanted to.
Yeah, they left.
They all left.
I mean, if I experienced,
they must have witnessed something that was that heinous to them. They must have them. I mean, somebody said they felt evil in the room. It felt evil. Now, this isn't a 5-minute thing, right? This is a long process. We talked about exorcisms before. The first one was 14 days. This one went on for about 3 months.
Yeah, it was a long time for. I mean, if it's not like you're walking into a room, see something, and then later on think that you saw something you didn't. You're gonna see it day after day after day after day. Mm-hmm. So it's ingrained in your memory of what you saw. Mm-hmm. You know, what I mean, that it's why some accounts you can't. It's why in psychology, it's why in a lot of criminal cases they can't take into account anyone who saw anything a lot of the time because people over exaggerate what they saw afterwards.
And we know that memory is very fallible, don't we? We've
exactly.
discussed this before. Memory is incredibly fallible, but
if you saw it day after day after day for like a couple of months on end, to 3 months, your memory is going to be pretty accurate.
See, I've seen a documentary on one of these streaming platforms, and it was about an exorcism. So it's probably one of these like dark tourist type of documentaries, and the whole process for their exorcism was quite traumatic. It's not just a case of having them lay there and chuck a bit of water over them.
It's bad. Yeah.
It is quite a traumatic experience. So I can see why some of these nuns might have looked at that and thought, do you know what, I can't go through that again. I'm leaving. Mm-hmm. So I can understand that.
Because that's where a lot of it was. A lot of people believe that the exorcisms basically was almost like torture to these people it was happening to, because that's kind of what it is. Because that's almost how an exorcism works, is you're trying to torture this demon out to leave. And obviously, if there is no demon, you're just basically torturing this person who's eventually going to start acting like one. In some sense.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because it could go either way. It's almost like an extreme form of cleansing for a person. So if it's inner demons we're talking about, her mental state is the issue, that constant repetition of prayers and chants and demons be out and stuff like that, it's almost like a cleansing session, but they're looking at it as an entity cleansing session. Couldn't this just be a psychological, extreme form of cleansing session? I don't even know if I'm making sense on this, but I find it incredible that if she has severe mental health issues that were causing it the first episode, and we're talking about a reoccurrence, for example, like, hi everybody in the chat room, by the way, I am seeing what you're commenting, so thank you for joining us. Someone said about it could be a paranoid schizophrenic episode or a multiple personality disorder. So say in the first instance when she was 14, they sort of got that back to being stabilised through reaffirmation of her faith. They're now doing it at 30, when she's 30 years of age. And would it be harder then to re-establish that stability through faith at 30 than it would have been at 14? The mind is more
She's probably seen a lot more, yeah. She's probably seen a lot more things that's kind of tested her faith, which is, I guess, in some senses what almost might have brought back on it might have made that question more what happened to her as a child. Because it doesn't go into that much depth on what actually happened to her as a child. No. It just went into that she was verbally abused by a father who mocked her for believing in the church. So we don't know if there was anything else, if there was if she was any actual physical abuse at all. Exactly.
We don't know.
That could have came that at the time she just was able to cover up with the belief. And that's just gotten older. Her belief is obviously weird, and that she's eventually ended up thinking again about what happened to her as a child, which is maybe caused her to have almost like a meltdown, which in some senses which might have, as she was possessed as a child, they might have automatically thought that she was possessed again, and then started treating her that way, and she's almost fell back into that role of that's that's what happened to us last time. Do that again.
I couldn't find any details either of when this aunt Mina and her father died.
Yeah, it was apparently still young, I believe. But she wasn't young enough. She wasn't young enough where she wouldn't be able to look after herself.
Right.
From what I was gathered.
Because the entities that are attached to her are supposed to be, like you said, her aunt, her father, Beelzebub himself, and Judas at one point came in, didn't he?
Yeah, who
when
saved
you
her.
look at those characters, you've got two highly religious, iconic figures that would have been talked about regularly at church. And what Judas was trying to encourage her to do was actually commit suicide with a rope. And then you've got the two people in reality that are her biggest tormentors that are attached as well, haven't you? So when I was looking at the entities that were supposed to have attached to her, they were very, what I would say, iconic.
Stereotypical.
Yeah, they're the ones you would expect somebody to be possessed by in her circumstance. Two tortured people, spirit-wise, that are dead, and then you've got the two big characters in the religious perspective that are supposed to be attached to her. So it is very difficult to judge, and I do find it fascinating. Was it entity attachment, or was this a psychological condition? Because you can explain it from both kinds of perspectives.
See, but what I found most interesting about it is that because this is more of a grand scheme of stuff, is if she had been possessed in any way, why would someone like Beelzebub, the devil, Judas, and obviously about mother and father makes sense, but these two incredibly high up demons possess such a minute, insignificant girl. What benefit is that to them at all? There's no benefit to them at all to possess this person.
That's always been my argument.
I mean, why not possess someone?
Yeah, somebody higher up, somebody that can. I mean, there are arguments that they have been possessed, but why not go for something where you can cause maximum trouble if that's your motivation for possessing people? I'm with you on that.
Because if I was a demon, I would be going after the highest up person I can get. You know what I mean? Actually try and do something, but
as much mayhem as possible, would you?
Exactly. If that was my entire meaning at that point to do, that's what I would do. I wouldn't just go for this random girl for no reason. I mean, it doesn't make much sense, especially if. Because what she said was that her father and her aunt was the people who gave her to the devil. Why would the devil turn around and go, oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to take this random young lass that I'm sure there's been thousands of other people who have been almost like sacrificed or been given to the devil, just to randomly choose this one girl. It doesn't make much sense at all.
Unless we go back to, it wasn't Beelzebub or, spirits of a dead family. It wasn't Judas. It was a jinn that actually was possessed, but they were being very deceitful in the information they were giving forward. So they're giving
That's true.
Yeah. They're giving enough information in regards to, like the car thing and certain languages and stuff like that. Sorry, I've got a massive blue bottle of blood flying around me. So they're able to do that, but they're very localized because they're not these big kind of, if you want to think about hierarchy. Do you know what I mean? If it's just a jinn, it's going to be deceptive in what it gives. If it is a possession, the more I looked at this, the more I could see psychological threads running through it. And I'm no psychologist. Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure you both felt the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I was looking at some of the research that you sent me over earlier, Kerry, and it's almost like a blow-by-blow account of what actually happened on this exorcism. And while she was speaking as Beelzebub, the priest Reisinger demanded to know who the lead demon was, and he was obviously told Beelzebub, and they wanted to know obviously why the father gave her to the devil, and basically it just turned around and said, well, you can ask him, because he's not having any peace. He's basically been damned, and he's one of us as well. And then that was another personality that came through.
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's obviously multiple personalities inside her at the time.
Well, that's one of the things they said, that they believe there was 5 altogether in her at once.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I don't know if there's a record for that and how many, but 5 is a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of demons.
Yeah.
I would have thought there's people out there that's probably claimed a lot more. Absolutely.
Well, one of the last exorcisms they did on Anna lasted 3 days, and we're not talking up with breaks. We're talking 3 continuous days of prayers over her. Now, Reisinger was the father that took that task on. 3 solid days and nights of prayer. They said that when he came out of the room, he had aged 20 years in those 3 days.
They said that you said he was. You never experienced anything like it. No. But what I don't understand what happened afterwards is that when she eventually apparently stood up and said that she was free and that the devil had gone, or that she was no longer possessed. That she was no longer possessed, which just confuses me, because it's like, how can you make that 90 turn, that almost 180 turn of lying in the bed, convulsing, throwing up constantly, all this just to turn and go, oh, I'm good now.
Yeah, thanks very much,
then
guys.
stay,
I'm all right
and
now.
then stay fine for the rest of her life.
Yeah, that's the other thing. That was it. It was fine.
So it's almost like she was acting. Maybe she was just an attention seeker.
I don't think
go
to those links for attention.
No, probably not.
I was going to say, as much as they could be a plausible explanation for it. She went through a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone could.
No. I mean, she was literally tied to the bed and strapped down to the iron bed that she had, and I think it's a bit too extreme. She went to the extremes if she's faking this one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why it confuses so much on how if all this was happening to someone who was genuinely conscious, was able to think, and then was able just to randomly get up at one point and say, I'm good now. Well, she didn't obviously just start and say, I'm good now, but in some ways she did. How could someone like that go through almost 3 months of this and then not almost be traumatized from that and then live a healthy life?
I just want to read the testimony of Teresa Wedgerer, who was actually the housekeeper for Father Steiger. So the guy who wrote the diary in the first place, who was present at the exorcism, this is his testimony of the housekeeper. Okay, she said, I was a witness to almost the whole period of the exorcism of the Earling possession case, and I can truthfully say that the facts mentioned in Begone Satan are correct. Some of the scenes were even more frightful than described in the booklet. There is not the slightest doubt in my mind that the devils were present, and I will never forget the horrible scenes, vile, filthy, and dirty, as long as I live.
Well, that's exactly what I would have wanted, is for someone who was physically there to kind of back up the claim.
And I think she's right. I mean, you can describe it in a book, it sounds fanciful, but if you lived that experience, say that happened, the climbing up the walls, the whole possession thing that went on for months, that, you're feeling evil, other things are happening that are strange. It is, when you start building it all up, to live around that going on, even if you're not involved, it's going on in the house, and you hear this girl screaming and making sounds like dogs and shouting out vile language, because all that's going on as well. You've got to remember, we're not talking like it's not a nice, quiet little exorcism. This girl is vocal, and people outside the priory heard the screams at one point. That this is what's gone on. So we're not talking like a walk in the park, really, are we? We're talking, and the fact that all the nuns, after a year, they all wanted to go to different priories. They didn't want to leave their profession. They just wanted out of there. That says a lot to me.
Yeah, definitely.
I just in the chat room that we've got loads of people. Thank you very much for coming in, and they're going on maybe a mental issue coupled with an attention-seeking disorder that's manifesting through her faith.
Yeah,
Which is
I
why
can
she's
see that.
putting herself in that position. I mean, God, you couldn't. Okay, let's look at that. You couldn't get more attention-seeking, could you, than a full-blown 3-month exorcism scenario?
Yeah, well, that's the only thing that can back up the claim of that. That's why she was just able to get up and say, "I'm fine." In some senses,
Well, that's it. And in her youth as well, she's had the Catholic upbringing. Then she was thrust into being abused by the dad, even if it was verbally. And then on top of that, you had like the aunt who was into the witchcraft stuff, or she was known locally as a witch. Mm-hmm. All that's got to sort of been messed up in her head somewhere. So I can understand what they're saying.
it is a really, really interesting one on it, and just how as a whole this could all go along, and to this day we have to ask the question whether it was real or not. And in the end, I kind of don't want it to be real, as it's incredibly scary and frightening experience if it was real.
Mm-hmm. Do you not feel, on reflection, that if you take it at face value and you believe it on the facts that were written down in the pamphlet, Be Gone Satan, if we take that on face value, how scary does that then make the paranormal world? It opens, if you believe things like that are true, then aren't we asking for trouble?
Yeah. Well, that's what makes me more confused more than anything, again, is the fact that when was the last recorded exorcism? Or when was the last recorded, what's it called again? The word's completely gone from us, but when someone's been taken over, I've completely forgot. I don't know. It's completely gone from us. Possession. That's it. Yeah. Possession. Yes. When was the last recorded possession in recent history? Why is
so? I think that okay. They might not be recorded, but people go to religious centres because they think they're possessed, cursed, or that they have some sort of possession at least. I mean, as I said, I see it in that documentary. People actually make money out of this as well. Yeah. They charge people.
Yeah. It's a big scam.
So it is happening. It is happening pretty much every day.
Not necessarily.
But not the same as well.
Not maybe in the UK, but we're talking worldwide. Worldwide.
I know what you mean, but I think the recent resurgence in interest, you'll always get a... it's almost fashionista. Do you know what I mean? It becomes like, I've got a possession kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Not me particularly, but I'm talking people. Do you not think it becomes more, because it's more widely acceptable, we know more about it, we're not getting the big cases like they were because we have got more knowledge, and I would say probably 99% of people are diagnosed with a mental problem rather than
this umbrella thing of, she was possessed. Mm-hmm. Someone was possessed. Yeah.
I do agree with that. Yeah.
I wonder now if Anna was brought into this day and age, at the young age where she first started possessed, it does make me wonder: would she actually now be diagnosed with a mental disorder rather than it being classed as a possession?
100%. Because I think even if there was such thing as possessions in the first place, I don't think they would ever claim that she was. I don't think there would ever be a wide claim that anyone would be possessed in modern day, as religion's not at the forefront anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking that because a lot of us, when we paranormal investigate, well, let's be fair, we haven't got a solid faith in a specific religion, I would say. Well, we're probably very open to a lot of different ideas and religious perspectives because of what we do. You know, the areas we go and we look at different things and histories, and we come across different folklores and stuff like that in the field, don't we? So I would say that we're not exactly a bunch of Sunday churchgoers. Our
exactly.
Faith is not as structured as it would have been back in this day and age. Back in that day and age. Do you see? So
yeah, absolutely.
One question. Sorry.
No, carry on.
One question I would have is, why is this, or why is exorcism and being possessed mainly a Catholic thing? Why don't you ever hear of a Muslim being almost possessed? Why is it a primarily Catholic thing?
Because it's on this one there is rights for every religion. Just a lot of religions will not talk about it, will not have it out there. And that's the bottom line. You get a closed door policy. I've got an Orthodox Jewish community living around me, and I actually approached the leader when they first moved into the area, because they're moving into the area. So I approached the leader. He's making connections in the community and stuff. And I said, I'd love to talk to you about this, about the theology side of it, and you know, the spirit side of it. And he wouldn't talk to me.
Very
so
closed doors.
They have a very closed door policy. They deal with those kind of problems strictly within their religious compounds and don't talk about it external. Whereas the Catholicism and Christianity are more open for discussion. Well, I've always found them more open for discussion. I don't know about you guys when I've spoken to leaders.
Yeah, no, I do find that they're quite happy to obviously spread the word or whatever. So they're always happy to talk to you about whatever you want to discuss.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But that's just my personal experience I'm talking about there. I'm not saying every leader won't talk to you. I'm just saying my experience when I've tried to discuss these kind of things with other church leaders, because I find it fascinating from every angle, not just... I like to talk to people, do you know what I mean, about all sorts of things. And if you've got that kind of person that's prepared to talk to you, gosh, amazing learning about that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Well, on that bombshell, we have actually come to the end of the show.
Fascinating
Time flies,
though, isn't it?
It really, really is. It's definitely something I would look into more and just see if there's anything else that was missed when looking for it, when looking for information.
I definitely think that pamphlet, Begone Satan, is worth a read if you want to know firsthand, like as close to the account as you can get. I definitely think that one would be worth a read from top to bottom on that one, because I think it would make fascinating reading.
So what have we got coming up for the rest of the week, Kerry? Okay. I know you're dying out there.
On Wednesday evening, I can't. Jamie Rubio is talking with Penny in the studio all about Niles Cannon in California tomorrow evening, kicking off 9 p.m. tomorrow. Then on Thursday, we've got another brand new show for you guys. We've got the Parallel Prism with our very own Jolene. She launches her show at 8 p.m. on Thursday evening, talking to, would you believe, Sally Morgan. We've got Sally Morgan into the studio. So, absolutely can't wait for that one. Then that's followed at 9 p.m. by Parasearch Radio. And they've got author, paranormal radio host from Iowa, Mr. Chuck Banks. And then on Friday, we lower the tone, as always, and bring you our Dark Mirror take on urban legends.
God help us all. That's all I can say about that one.
It's going to be a good show, that one. I'm looking forward to that one.
Well, on next week's Paranormal Concept Show, we have the co-owner or investigator of City of London Paranormal Group coming into studio to talk with us about what they do.
Fantastic. Look forward to that.
Yeah.
Haven't done an interview for a while.
I know, it's good, isn't it? We really must do some more, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Just to prove we can still do it.
Oh, maybe now and again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Kieron, for joining us tonight.
It's absolutely okay. It was great being on.
Yeah, we'll definitely stay in touch, and maybe we'll get you on again talking about another subject very soon.
Yeah, 100%. And if there's anything new for us to research or new to look into, I'll be more than happy to, as this one was really interesting.
Yeah, if anything comes up, like from your end as well, if whatever's trending at the time and you want to talk about it, let us know, and maybe we can get a show and put you on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll keep in touch.
Yeah, excellent. Cool. So thank you for that. I want to thank everyone that's been in the chat room as well. Thank you for all your comments. It's been a blast as always. If we didn't get to read out your messages, then sorry, maybe next time. That's Kerry's fault. I'm going to blame Kerry totally for that.
Right, you. Cheeky.
Thank you, Kerry, as well, for joining us. Yeah, it's fantastic. So all that remains to be said is it's a goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.